and we'll get started with questions here, and hopefully we'll have some of our members return as we go through it. And my question is really for each of you. We'll start with Mr. Tilley, and I always ask the question on how, particularly in a lot of these programs through the SBC, how you found out about it. And Mr. Tilley, you can speak specifically to that. Some of you have members, obviously you can speak to, or what your experience is talking to other folks, but I would very much be curious on either how you learned about the program or how others did, or what we can do to improve that, obviously. Mr. Tully?
This was our first time, any of the founders, through the process, so we weren't really quite sure how to go and get it done. We just knew that we had to do a lot of things, and it was tough to get financing right now, so how can we look for alternate ways than we would normally do. We actually went and hired a consultant that had done this before and paid him $5,000. He went out there and searched the different agencies that would be applicable for us, and he came up with the EPA and the National Science Foundation, and then we just went through the process.
Standrich?
Yeah, I had accepted a job at Indiana University about 12, 13 years ago. When I arrived on campus, the Vice President for External Research, Jeff Alberts, wanted to meet me, and I thought he'd ask me how was the move in the schools. I couldn't get him to shut up about what he kept talking about, the SBIR thing. He's a psychology professor. He tests, he makes cages for animals that they now do up in the space shuttle and space station and so on. And in order to do his research at NASA, he was told he had to start a company. He started the SBIR, and he just had received Phase 2 funding. And he subsequently employed, I don't know, dozens and dozens of people. And it was really hearing him is what keyed me how important the SBIR is, because it's making entrepreneurs out of very capable scientists and engineers, really changing their career trajectories.
Galante?
RMD has been involved in the program since the very beginning of the program. The company was founded in 1974, and you asked the question. I remember a conversation where the president of the company came to me and said, "There's this new program, SBIR. Do you think we ought to participate?" We looked at it and said, "Sure, why not?" But I assume we learned about it through the Commerce Business Daily in those days. No electronic communication then.
Yeah. Ms. Rigg?
As I mentioned in my remarks, Parkinson's disease is not particularly attractive necessarily to large pharmas because the population is considered relatively small. 1 million people have Parkinson's, and a brain disease is very complicated and high risk. And so not just about SBIR, but we've been very focused as an organization and a community on the Valley of Death, where basic discoveries therapeutic potential is not necessarily explored, and there isn't a great deal of private money. So in looking at all those challenges for our disease as well as others, you can't help but see the SBIR program. Some companies have received SBIR grants for Parkinson's therapies, but it is certainly one of the components for trying to traverse that dreadful valley of death and get something to the point where the larger pharma will pick it up and run with it.
Well, it's always a challenge, obviously, and there's some great opportunities out there for small businesses, but it's always a challenge, getting the information out there and so that they know what opportunities are out there. I'll turn to Ms. Velasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Rigg, since the SBA eligibility determination, small business SBIR applications have decreased. Besides changing the eligibility criteria rules, what other steps can be taken to ensure that small businesses or small firms with the best science and greatest potential to provide treatment are applying for SBIR awards?
Well, in fact, the compromise that is in the Senate legislation seems appropriate to us. It is my understanding as well that applications dropped after the SBA ruling, and that is not acceptable to us. We think the most important thing is to fund the most promising projects. But I think it is I think we need to find a way to move on from the VC issue, and again, the compromise seems appropriate, and rather focus on educating about SBIR. Quite frankly, I think the SBIR program fills one very important niche at NIH in terms of need for translational research, but it's not the only one, and I think there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of educating about the value of translational research and promoting the value of taking basic scientific discoveries and moving them from a knowledge-based basic research mode to product development. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And I think there is room, as the Chairman mentioned, for more education about SBIR program in general and how many success stories there are from that.
Thank you. Dr. Aldrich, do truly small businesses really receive venture funding?
Yes, sometimes. It's hard to generalize, actually, about which kinds of companies, either which kind of companies receive venture funding, because the answer is, well, promising growth companies do, but they can be small, they can be new, sometimes they're very actually established, sometimes they're old, they're big. It's hard to generalize, other than these are high potential growth companies. Or conversely, it's hard to generalize where small business gets its funding. We all know about the 3 Fs.
So if you have venture funding, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a large company.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Dr. Escalante, according to SBA's TechNet database, RMD has won 386 awards for $152 million. This places RMD by itself above 23 states, including Missouri, Montana, Delaware, and Rhode Island, Iowa. In fact, RMD, again by itself, has won more in SBIR funds than Idaho, Mississippi, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota combined. In your testimony, you go to great length to talk about the program mission when it was created, and that it was intended to greatly benefit firms, a lot of firms, to provide the grants for them to do move from phase 1 to phase 2, and then commercialization. So given this, do you believe that when this program was created, was intended to greatly benefit just a few companies while overlooking so many others?
No, I don't think so. I think the program, the goals of the program are clear, and I think the program is designed to support the best research that's in the interest of the agencies in the country. And
that should be a very important criteria.
Yes.
Yes. So according to your parent company's Dynacell SEC 10K filing, RMD is part of a 6-company corporate conglomerate with annual revenue of $43 million. Given that small businesses applying for SBIR do not have any revenue and are independent, what are some of the advantages that you have over this type of entrepreneurs?
Well, I think we obviously have experience, which helps, and we have 6 research groups. The company has grown over the years. We're doing research in high-performance sensors. We've established relationships with many universities and many other small companies. So when we submit proposals in conjunction with either university groups that have skills or equipment that we don't have, or with small companies who can provide expertise that we don't have.
One of the main purposes of SBIR is to bridge the valley of death. And one important challenge that small firms have is access to capital. Dynacell, the corporation that owns you, was able to establish lines of credit totaling $17 million. So with so many access to so much credit, why does the RMD need millions of dollars worth of taxpayer provided to get those grants?
Well, the merger with Dynasil was 2008. Before that, we were private company. At this time now, Dynasil is investing money in the commercialization of products. So the SBIR is doing just what it's supposed to do. It's helping us develop new technologies, create new ideas, develop these into products. And the best part about the relationship with Dynasil is they have the means to help us avoid this valley of death by taking our technologies and commercializing them.
This will provide the means for some of the SBIR firms to bring their research into commercialization. Dr. Aldrich, under the current eligibility rules, it is possible for a business with 222 employees and a net worth of $43 million, like Dr. Escalante's company, to receive an SBIR grant. So, however, a company with 5 employees and only $1 million in net worth could be ineligible for these type of grants because it is majority owned by a venture capital company. So my question to you is, does this seem like a fair and equitable system?
No. And you didn't ask, but it also doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make economic sense. I would not link the financial structure of a company to its eligibility for SBIR.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have other questions in the second round.
Mr. Barletta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Aldrich, in your testimony, you described how you were concerned about how SBIR awards are concentrated in certain regions of the country. Do you know what regions of the country have the highest concentration of SBIR program award recipients?
The Bay Area.
Why do you think this is the case?
Because that's where the supply of ideas, the potential of for translational research is the greatest in the country.
And how do you think we can increase the number of SBIR awards outside of that region?
I think by, and this has come up in the discussion, by increasing the information about the program is exactly what the Chairman asked in his introductory remarks. I think as we get away from these very successful clusters of SBIR, there's much less familiarity, awareness that the program exists. So I think that there's a big opportunity to increase the participation in the SBIR simply by through information, by trying to get that message out there.
Thank you. Ms. Rick, I understand that sometimes when the National Institute of Health starts doing research on one disease, they find that treatments for this disease can be useful in treating others. In your opinion, how often does this occur? And how important is the SBIR operation of the National Institute of Health in finding treatments for a wide variety of diseases?
I can't give you an accurate answer on how often a particular compound or treatment moves to another disease. In fact, NIH's primary portfolio is basic research, and in spite of the growth that it's experiencing right now into the area of translational research, I think basic research is still its primary function, and 60% of its budget goes towards basic research. So that would be research that, in the neurological area, for example, could be you learn something that's relevant to Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS, Huntington's. I think that it's fundamental, though, that SBIR and other translational programs continue to be promoted at NIH in order for us to be able to benefit from the basic research that NIH does fund. Our primary problem is getting discoveries, potential discoveries, bright ideas, but we've got a long way to go to figure out if they're going to go anywhere, getting them through that valley of death to a point where the larger companies are willing to pick it up, and that's exactly the role for biomedical research that NIH SBIR fills.
Like you, I'm concerned about the dramatic shift away from private investment funds in biomedical research over the past few years. In your testimony, you argue that the lack of appeal for investors may either occur because biomedical research takes a long time to complete, or because the size of the potential markets for certain diseases like Parkinson's are too small. In addition to reauthorizing the SBIR program, what else can members of Congress do to provide incentives for private investors to invest in biomedical research?
Well, that's certainly an interesting question. There could be tax credit options, some of which I know are being discussed now. But aside from SBIR, the National Institutes of Health is going through a process right now that you may be familiar with of creating a new institute at NIH, the NCATS Institute, that will consolidate the other translational research that's going on at NIH to allow for more efficient and coordinated promotion of translational research. And we hope to look at some of the hurdles that cross multiple diseases. A good example is blood-brain barrier, which is significant in Parkinson's, but by no means unique to Parkinson's. And I think what we need to look at, in our experience, translational research has been almost a second-class form of research, that it's about product development and therapy development, not necessarily the gaining of further knowledge. And we think whatever the NIH and Congress's support of that, what we can do to promote the significance of translational research so that public dollars are used to bring ideas or therapies to the point where private can pick them up. That's really what we need to do, and NIH seems to be the most logical place to do that. So I would say support for the NIH movement that we've seen last year and this year towards promoting translational research within its current budget is very important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Aldrich, one of the goals of the SBIR program is to increase the participation of minorities and disadvantaged people in the process of technological innovation. But in your testimony, you talked about the fact that female participation in SBIR has increased only marginally over time, and that Phase 2 awards for women have increased only from 8% to now 9.5%, and also that minority participation has decreased over time. Can you say something about why this is occurring and also what we should do about this?
No. To the first, no, I don't know actually why this is occurring. I think that it's an important area for research and for independent scrutiny. I think that it wasn't, I think this is a very important question. So the answer is no, I don't know at this point. Now the second one, I actually have a little insight as to what could be done from my own research of analyzing NIH, the top NIH scientists who've gotten funded over a period of time. And we see that there's a gender pattern of scientists who start companies. Males have a much higher likelihood of starting companies. But when we ask the question, why do some scientists of these NIH funding scientists start companies, others don't? Gender is an important variable. However, when we control for interactions with the private sector, if they sit on boards, if they write articles with scientists in private industry, that gender gap goes away. Now, that doesn't tell me that would help for the SBIR, but it does tell me a little bit. It makes me, it suggests that interactions of scientists, engineers at universities with the private sector, that will tend to promote commercialization activities. And we see actually, oh, that gender gap disappears. Now, that's not for SBIR. That's for scientists starting companies. But at least it gives me a hint.
How about with regard to the minority question?
Oh, the minority?
How can we increase participation?
We didn't, I don't know at this point.
Okay, well, on another topic, the SBIR program is generally recognized as a successful program. However, for 2 decades, it's continued to suffer from some long-standing evaluation and monitoring issues. There have been identified problems with federal agencies assessing SBIR, including limited and ad hoc evaluation efforts, difficulty in defining and measuring SBIR goals, competing SBIR objectives, and limited electronic data collection efforts. The GAO did find that SBA had taken some steps to address these challenges, but was still behind on the online database, and some of the data was inconsistent. What steps could be taken to ensure that SBIR can adequately assess performance?
I think it's to improve exactly what you were referring to in the question, to have a systematic data system where all the activities recorded of SBIR firms, but also of the applicants. In fact, this would also go in order to, it addresses your previous question, in order to understand the role of females and minorities in the SBIR, we would need to know about the applicants who didn't get funded, for example. So we need to have systematic longitudinal measurement, and we need to make that provide access to researchers who want to address the kind of questions you just asked.
Okay. There is also a question about awards that are sometimes significantly below or above SBIR guidelines. This has raised questions about the limited availability of program funding and the merits of exceeding guidelines for award amounts. And GAO found that 50% of NIH awards and 12% of DoD awards exceeded SBIR guidelines. So to what extent do very large awards help or hinder access to capital by other qualified companies?
The National Research Council and their evaluation, but this has been echoed by most of the research I've seen on the SBIR, think that the flexibility of the program is a great asset. And it's very difficult. It's when you really think about the scope of the program, you know, it ranges from NIH to NSF to Department of Defense. These are very different missions by these agencies. You've got such a heterogeneous group of projects in firms, so that a one-size-fits-all approach is probably not ideal. I think the flexibility has been an asset, actually. I don't think this is, I think the flexibility does not deter innovative companies or potentially innovative companies for applying for SBIR. I think it enhances the congressional goals.
Thank you.
Mr. West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Ranking Member. Thanks, panel, for joining us here today. And I want to kind of follow on with Ranking Member Velasquez's inquiry as far as, you know, the type of metrics that we can use for evaluative criteria, because, you know, one of the things we want to see is a level type of playing field out there. So what I would put out to the panel as a question is, what things other than just commercialization, what are some other good evaluative criteria that kind of gives everyone that semblance of a level playing field so they can apply for these grants? Recommendations.
As I excuse me, as I talked about in my testimony, what I call the triple bottom line. Not only when the agencies look at the companies, are these guys going to be successful? Are they going to drive job growth? Is there going to be some return to the taxpayers? If they go beyond that and look for the next two bottom lines, are they there? Is there an additional public access? Is there additional public benefit? In my business, I talk about this stimulus package because we're taking trash and turning it into cash. But there's lots of things in lots of these businesses that do things other than just driving jobs growth. And then the third one that I like to use is what's the hot issue of the day that we're all wrestling with, and in our issue, it's the environment, right? So if you can find companies that can provide environmental benefit or other type of things that provide better, greater good than just pure capitalization and pure commercialization, I think those are all things that should be looked at in the process, and I don't think they're looked at that much today.
If I could, yes. I think that I guess the question would be, how would you find metrics to measure success? And you have, the goals are fairly clearly stated. Stimulate technological innovation, and part of that is doing good research and development. And that's measured by peer-reviewed publications in journals. It's measured by participating in meetings. It's measured by other researchers in the field or other developers in the field adopting the technologies that you've developed under SBIR. And those are definitely quantifiable. Whether meeting Federal agency needs, I mean, the question there is, have any of the agencies adopted the technologies, and are they supporting it for transition to the field? And that's also quantifiable. And it's an important part of the SBIR program. And hopefully the support for that would be enhanced, and then measurement of it is also important. Increasing commercialization is what we've mostly been working, the community has mostly been working on in terms of quantifying it. And I think by those standards, RMD has been very successful in all three of those. The fourth issue of fostering and encouraging participation of minority is, I mean, it's a demographics question in terms of measuring it. And I think one of the things that can be done to improve that is the FAST program, Federal and State Technology Partnership Program, and other outreach programs like that. And several years ago, the NIH was very active in trying to do outreach, and I think NASA has done some outreach. But I think first of all, the people who potentially could apply for it have to understand the program. They need help in preparing proposals and understanding what a reviewer needs to see. And the SBTC and I myself have mentored small companies to try to help them participate in the program. So we need to educate and reach out to these companies.
If I could just add, in the biomedical area where so many promising ideas do fail, I think it's important to not use SBI as an SBIR measurement only whether a successful product came out of this, because again, we would prefer that result, but in the biomedical field, learning that something appeared promising and doesn't work and educating other researchers about that is still a lower level of success, and high-risk projects should be supported by SBIR.
Mr. West, your colleague, Mr. Barletta, in an earlier question, raised or mentioned the example of Silicon Valley as not only the leader of SBIR awards, but more importantly, the most innovative place in the world. People say, scholars say, oh, the birth of Silicon Valley came from a company named Fairchild. Fairchild failed. It never really came up with, it was a semiconductor company, it never really succeeded. But out of Fairchild, one of the founders, Gordon Moore, founded Intel, and the rest is history for Intel, but also for Silicon Valley. I think that illustrates exactly your point, Ms. Rick, that it certainly makes evaluating the SBIR program challenging, because it's hard for me to say Fairchild was a failure, maybe to the stockholders, but not to Silicon Valley, not to the United States.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Velasquez. You know, at a time when our nation's economy is struggling to rebound, the SBIRs have played a vital role in spurring job creation and innovation. The district that I represent has been a beneficiary of the innovative spirit of the SBIR that the SBIR program fosters. The Biosignal Group, which operates out of the State University of New York Downstate Medical Center, was a recipient of the SBIR funding in 2007, 2008, and 2009. They have done remarkable research on parts of the brain that control different aspects of memory, such as spatial knowledge, motor skills, emotional associations. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter a New York Times article on Biosignal's contributions into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. While I'm a supporter of the SBIR program, like Congresswoman Chu, I am concerned with the downward trend in participation amongst women and minority-owned businesses. Minority-owned businesses participation fell below 10% in 2004, and that trend shows no sign of turning around. So I'd like to extend this conversation to the panel. And I wanted to know whether you all were aware that the program the SBA had in place to reach out to women and minority-owned businesses expired in 2005. Maybe this may have some bearing, but I'd like for you to give me a sense of what we can do to ensure that this issue is addressed in a way that has real-world effect of turning these numbers around. And I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses. And I'd like to start with you, Ms. Comstock Rick, excuse me.
Okay. I don't have access to particular data about minority participation in this program, but I will say after spending years of working with NIH and spending a fair amount of my time at meetings with neurologists presenting their research, this is not an issue unique to SBIR. That in the scientific research field, I think minority and female participation is low. So I would view that as a larger problem in the scientific world, at least within the neurological world.
Well, I think it really is a question of making potential applicants aware of the program, and then helping them with even just the basics of submitting proposals, and teach them how to work with, like if you have a small company, it's 1 or 2 people, you almost certainly need to work with somebody at a university, and you can show someone how they go about finding people. It's fairly easy how they go about finding university people. And my experience with universities, for the most part, they want to work with other people and collaborate. So I don't think it would be hard. And I think if a new company, even very small, with a strong university collaborator, significantly increases the odds. So it really is teaching people who haven't been in the program what the steps are to succeeding.
Dr. Aldrich, this was your this was something that you put out into the atmosphere, so I want to get your feedback on it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that the overall congressional goal of enhancing American innovation, that's a wonderful opportunity. If we can increase the participation rates of these groups that have had low participation rates, the economy will be more innovative. I don't know exactly, but I would think that we've addressed this in other areas, and we've seen a response. I don't think we've really tried to do this at the SBIR yet. So I'm not pessimistic. I'm optimistic. I see it as an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I just found it I found it interesting that the SBA had stopped their outreach in 2004, and we saw this.
Well, right. In fact, that may be the reason why you said yourself, that may be one of the reasons why the participation rate's gone down. And like my colleague just said, I think that scientists, people at universities are socially oriented. If there are opportunities, they'll engage in those opportunities. I think the potential for information, bringing people together, there's a big potential for that. It's a social process.
Thank you.
I'll add to that. Now, this is the first process that I've ever gone through, or any of my founders, through a grant writing process. And although we know technology for 20 or 30 years, we've never done grant writing. So we had to go out and hire someone who knew how to do this and how to access the system and spend $5,000 that maybe a lot of these other businesses didn't have available to them. That's why they're looking for money. So a novel idea might be to, as a requirement of this great grant money that you give us all, is perhaps to set up some sort of a group amongst people who have received, companies who have received these grants, to aid these minority-owned businesses in the grant writing process, so that they don't have to go out and spend $5,000 and look for someone and not even realize perhaps that it's available to them. But they go on the website and they say, here's your here's the people you can talk to. A lot of them should be at university. They probably do it for a living, or even other commercial companies, and let them, that's part of what we give back, help new companies write those grant requests.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your feedback. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Richmond?
I guess, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Velasquez. I guess the first question would be to Dr. Ostrich. And you talked about Silicon Valley and the concentration there, and I guess one of my questions would be coming from New Orleans, which in the metropolitan area, which has had some awards but not very many. But we now have a concentration on entrepreneurship and innovation in New Orleans. What can cities do to push and to assist companies in applying for these awards to make it and leverage the dollars better, local municipalities?
Yeah, I very much appreciate that question. The answer is a lot. They're doing a lot of varied types of policies trying to leverage the SBIR opportunities. Among other things, they have, some states at least, have programs where there are program administrators who try to link up potential projects from the funding agencies with scientists, engineers, who to try to get a good match, and they'll actually. So they're really they're a middleman essentially, and they go out in the field. I've been with some of them and seen this in very interesting meetings. That's really their job, to try to generate SBIR proposals. Those cities or states will also have funds. It kind of links back to the previous question. I mean, those concerns about about minorities and female participation rates can also be addressed at the local level, the city level, or the state level by providing funds to help, say, with the grant writing. But I think it really, that one-to-one personal contact that says, here's what you can do to get funding, I think that can make a big difference.
And one of the things we did, even with new market tax credit, was to create a state piggyback to make it more advantageous to use it there. In part of looking at it and talking to my senior senator, who's Senator Landrieu, who's pushing this, part of the concern, as I understand it, is the venture capital and the amount of investment that they can have for a firm to still qualify. And let's weigh that against the long-term reauthorization, which is a benefit, so people can strategically plan years out. And I guess the question becomes, if you weigh those against each other, what wins? And give me some of the concerns that you would have in terms of, do you sacrifice a long-term reauthorization for a larger percentage? And I'd just be interested in your opinion on that.
I think my colleague before, in his remarks, said he made a plea and said, we need to move fast in reauthorizing SBIR. That's got to have a high priority. I'd also point out that venture capital funding is by far the great exception in this country to firms, large and small, to SBIR firms as well. I would, as I stated before, there's no economic grounds for linking the financial structure of a firm to its whether or not it's qualified for SBIR. That's my preference. But the way you asked the question is very good. I would put a priority on moving ahead with so that companies can know and have the certainty in the future.
I appreciate that. And if anyone else wants to comment on that, that's my last question, so go ahead.
I actually wanted to comment on your earlier question about what can cities do.
Okay.
In our experience, academic research centers around the country, Michigan, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, It varies so much in terms of the programs they have to take basic research biomedical discoveries and help their researchers get them through this valley of death. Some institutions actually have offices that are set up to help basic researchers who aren't schooled in the intellectual property issues and the FDA issues, the funding issues, the legal issues for transferring something from a discovery to a product. Some institutions have offices for this, some don't. Office that is helping a basic researcher who's schooled in biomedical research figure out how to take this potential bright idea that they have and test its product potential. That could be done by a city. That could be done by a partnership in a city between private and academic research center and sub-public money. And so I think there's opportunities to look at the successful programs around the country that are doing that and see if it can be replicated.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
If I could, one very brief comment. I mean, the obvious thing people think of with states is that, well, they could provide extra funding to the companies. Most states probably don't have the resources to do that. Massachusetts has an organization called the Massachusetts Technology Corporation, and they don't provide funding for companies for their SBI research. What they will do, and it's small but it's significant, is if you send them your proposal, they'll review it and they'll edit it and tell you what you should change. And I've seen proposals that they've done this to that really turned them from losing proposals to winning proposals. It's an extremely inexpensive thing to do. They probably get it done with volunteers, and it costs the state very little because, I mean, there has to be some administrator in this organization. But and it's not officially part of his job, but they do this for small companies.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to go over a few minutes, and I'll yield back.
Thanks. Ms. Velasquez.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a last question, if I may, Dr. Outridge. The Senate has proposed to allow venture firms to participate in the SBIR program, but only allow them to access 25% of an agency's SBIR fund. Given your knowledge of the program and the way venture capital companies come to fund businesses, does it make sense to quarantine a portion of the SBIR funds to these firms?
No, I don't see an economic justification for it.
So what impact would designating an arbitrary percentage of award funds to venture-backed companies have on small businesses and innovation?
A negative one. How negative, I can't say. But it will be negative. It won't be positive.
If you were to have percentage, how would one even develop a methodology to determine what % should go or be allocated to these firms?
I don't think that could be worked out.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for this hearing, and let me just state for the record, we all want to get this reauthorization done. But if we're going to authorize this for 10, 14 years, we got to do it right. And it has to be in a way that works and work for small firms. Otherwise, we cannot abdicate our responsibility in this committee. Thank you.
I'd like to echo the ranking member's remarks. And, you know, the SBIR and STTR programs are widely recognized as you know, the country's most important engines of innovation. And we're going to work, you know, this is the start of the process, and we're going to work very hard to get a bill out and on the floor, the House floor in May, and then ultimately, as quick as we can, get it to the President's desk so he can hopefully sign it. But I'd appreciate or want to say thank you to each of our witnesses for coming and appreciate you being here. And I would ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to submit their statements and supporting materials for the record without objection. That's so ordered, and the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.